folks. Gigi here. Pretty impromptu little special segment here for our B-Sides and Rarities channel. This is going to be really quick, and obviously it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so obviously not a lot of people are going to be tuning in live. This is more for you to just, next time you're cooking dinner, you're going to bed, and you want to have a good something to think about for about 10 or 20 minutes. That's what this is for. So, a little backstory on this. Hey, what's up, Craig? So a little backstory on this. I talked to Dr. Richard Allen Miller for quite a while this morning, just talking about everything and nothing and everything under the sun, as usual. And so he just sent me a segment from a book, and which this is a lot of what we were talking about this morning, and it's just something to chew on, something to think about. And it's from a book called The Dialectical Materialism by A. Spurgeon. And the segment I'm about to read to you is Chapter 2, The System of Categories in Philosophical Thought. And that's basically all I'm doing here is I'm just going to read this little segment of this chapter that he sent me, because I find it very fascinating, and I figured I would just share it with you guys as well. So, without any further ado, let me cue up the thing here. Alright, so without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So this segment is called Space and Time. The concept of space and time. All material bodies have a certain extension, length, breadth, height. They are variously placed in relation to each other and constitute parts of one or another system. Space is a form of coordination and coexisting objects and states of matter. It consists in the fact that objects are extraposed to one another. For example, alongside, beside, beneath, above, within, behind, in front, etc., and have certain quantitative relationships. The order of coexistence of these objects and their states forms the structure of space. Material phenomena are characterized by their duration, the sequence of the stages of their motion, their development. Processes may take place either simultaneously or precede or succeed one another. Such, for example, is the interrelation between day and night. The dimension of time can be measured only with the help of certain standards: seconds, minutes, hours, days, years, century, etc. That is to say, motions that are accepted as being even. The perception of time also allows us to access the sequence and duration of events. Depending on our subjective sensations, such as merriment or grief, pleasure or boredom, time seems either short or long. Time is a form of coordination of objects and states of matter in their succession. It consists in the fact that every state is a consecutive link in a process and has certain quantitative relations with other states. The order of succession of these objects and states forms the structure of time. All right, take a little drink break here. Get a little hit of this. And let's continue. Space and time are universal forms of the existence of matter, the coordination of objects, the universality, I've never seen that word before. The universality, of these forms lies in the fact that they are forms of existence of all the objects and processes that have ever existed or will exist in the infinite universe. Not only the events of the external world, but also all feelings and thoughts take place in space and time. In the material world, everything has extension and duration. Space and time have their peculiarities. Man, my mouth sucks right now. Space has 3 dimensions: length, breadth, and height. But time has only one, from the past through the present to the future. It is inevitable, unrepeatable, and irreversible. Correct understanding of the essence of space and time is closely connected with the scientific picture of the world. Everything is differentiated, broken down into relatively stable, extraposed material forms. The processes that occur in them and condition their conservation or reproduction, and at the same time their transformation, are also differentiated. They constitute the consecutive change of the states of an object. Space and time exist objectively. I repeat, space and time exist objectively. Think about that. Although we may feel how time in its inexorable passage is carrying us away, we can neither halt nor prolong it. We cannot recover a single moment of existence. The flow of time is beyond our control. We are as helpless in it as a chip of wood in a river. Dialectics proceeds from acknowledgement of the unity of motion, space, time, and matter, which is expressed in the principle that various forms of the structural organization of matter and the levels of this organization are characterized by their specific motion, space, and time. Thus, the spatial organization of a crystal differs from that of a blossoming rose. The time of historical events is experienced by their participants and is observed in the memory of mankind, and this kind of time differs from the purely physical time of, say, the motion of the celestial bodies. However, metaphysical thought separates matter from motion, and both of them from space and time. Newton, for example, assumed that space was the empty container of things, that it was incorporeal, absolutely penetrable, never influenced anything, and was never affected by any influence. Universal space was considered to be filled with absolutely motionless ether, and moving bodies were thought to encounter an ethereal wind like the wind that resists a running person. Space was allegedly immutable and motionless. Its attributes did not depend on anything, even time, nor did they depend on material bodies or their motion. One could remove all bodies from space, and space would still exist and retain its attributes. Newton held the same views about this. He believed that time flowed in the same way throughout the universe, and this flow did not depend on anything. Time was therefore absolute, like a river. It flowed on of its own accord, heedless of the existence of material processes. All right, another drink and vape break. All right, and we continue. The idea of absolute space and time correspondence to the physical picture of the world, namely the system of views of matter as a set of atoms separated from each other, possessing immutable volume and inertia, or mass, and influencing each other instantaneously either at a distance or through contact. You know the whole the concept of what's it called? Anyway, I'll shut up. I'll keep reading. Revision of the physical picture of the world changed the view of space and time. The discovery of the electromagnetic field and the realization that field could not be reduced to a state of mechanical environment revealed the flaws in the classical picture of the world. Again, we're kind of talking about quantum entanglement here. It turned out that matter could not be represented as a set of separate, strictly disassociated elements. The particles of matter are indeed connected with one another in integral systems by fields whose actions is transmitted at a finite speed that is equal for any closed system, or in other words, the speed of light in a vacuum. It was held previously that if all matter disappeared from the universe, space and time would remain. The theory of relativity, however, maintains that with the disappearance of matter, space and time would also disappear. To sum up, everything in the world is spatial and temporal. Space and time are absolute. But since these are forms of matter in motion, they are not indifferent to their content. When it moves, an object does not leave an empty form behind it. Space is not an apartment that can be let out to such a tenant as matter, and time cannot be compared to some monster that gnaws at things and leaves its tooth marks on them. Space and time are conditioned by matter, as a form is conditioned by its content, and every level of motion of matter possesses its space-time structure. Thus, living cells and organisms, in which geometry becomes more and more complex and the rhythm of time changes, possesses special space-time properties. This is biological time. There is also historical time, however, whose unit may be the replacement of one generation by another, which corresponds to a century. Depending on our practical needs, historical time is counted in centuries and millennia. The reference point may be certain cultural, historical events, or even legends. Now, the next section. The finite and the infinite. Or infinite. Yeah, why don't we say infinite? You know? Finite, infinite. Wouldn't that make sense? Anyway, another drink and vape break here. All right. So on to the next part. The finite and the infinite. Whose imagination has not been stirred by a mysterious sense of the vastness of the universe? What man has looked up at the dark sky glittering with its myriads of stars and not been awed by the glamour of outer space? Whose heart has not been moved by the majestic splendor of the nocturnal heavens? Well, in our everyday lives, our dealings with everything around us, we encounter finite objects, processes. The finite means something that has an end, that is limited in space. In everyday practice, we may mean by infinity anything very big or very small, depending on the circumstances. For example, 1 billion raised to the power of 100 is in practice an infinite quantity. Our experience is too limited for us to be able to define infinity. Scientists like to joke that they begin to understand infinity only when they think of human folly. One may throw a spear from a certain point in space, and from the place where it lands, one may repeat the throw. And one may go on doing this again and again, never reaching any boundary. No matter how distant a star may be from us, we may still go further than that star. The universe is never boarded up. Infinity cannot be traversed to its end. Such infinity would be a false infinity. True infinity means constant going beyond the limits of the finite. The universe is not given in any cut and dried form. It is constantly reproducing itself. It is a reality that is constantly recreated. The infinite manifests itself in the finite and through the finite. Through the finite, we come to an understanding, a knowledge of the infinite. The finite is a constantly appearing and disappearing moment of an infinite process of change. Change is, in general, associated with an object's going beyond its spatial, temporal, quantitative, and qualitative limits. The very fact of the interaction of things is constant going beyond the limits of finite, individual existence. In this constant going beyond oneself into outer being lies the infinite nature of finite. An object in innumerable relations with other objects. Thereby, it acquires an infinite number of properties, and in this sense, infinity implies qualitative diversity, realized in space and time. We have advanced from the scale of the Earth to the expanses of outer space, to time that has no beginning and no end. This is extensive infinity. We ourselves appear to be standing midway Between the infinite expanses of the universe with its worlds that are known or unknown to us, and the equally infinite depths of the world of the smallest particles of matter, which is intensive infinity. We are the junction, as it were, of roads that lead away into the infinitely large and the infinitely small. We are mere specks of dust in comparison with the stars, and at the same time, we are giants compared to the tiny microorganisms that swarm in every drop of water. Thought has penetrated from regions describably only in terms of millions of light years to regions that may be measured in trillions of a centimeter. And there, too, we find the properties of the finite and the infinite just as well. Thus, many physicists assume the existence of a certain basic length, the spatial quantum. It would, they say, be as pointless to consider any smaller length as it would be to consider, for example, a quantity of gold less than 1 atom, because such a quantity would not even constitute the given chemical element. So scientists assume the existence of atoms of space. From this follows the recognition of minimal time, beyond whose limits the concept of phase, that is to say, changes of state in time, loses all meaning. All right, another drink and vape break here. Hey, what's up, Dan? Yeah, you're going to have to go back and catch the beginning of this one, brother. I'm already halfway through it. By the way, I'm just reading an article that Dr. Richard Alan Miller sent me, so definitely go back and check it out from the beginning. Anyway, to continue, an attempt to refute the theory of the infinity of the universe is to be found in the concept of the expanding universe. James Jeans, for example, assumed that not only was the quantity of matter in the universe diminishing, but also that any matter that remained was constantly receding into space at a colossal and ominously increasing speed. Yet, there are no valid grounds for such conclusions. The metagalaxy in which we observe this centrifugal movement of the galaxies, despite its enormous size as it appears to us, is only a tiny particle in the infinite universe, so it cannot be assumed that the whole universe is expanding. Right? So, to sum up, and I'm getting to the very end here, to sum up, all objects and processes in the world are finite, but the totality of finite things and processes is infinite. The universe had no beginning, has no end, and is inexhaustible. Beyond the most distant stellar systems that modern science and technology have permitted us to observe, there are still other gigantic celestial bodies, and so on ad infinitum. That's another new word today, folks. And so on ad infinitum. There are no limits beyond which there might be something that cannot be embraced by the concept of objective reality, and there is nothing above it or outside it. Objective reality is in everything. In fact, it is everything. The concept of limit has meaning only when applied to the finite. Neither our distance-bound imagination nor the spacemen of the future can ever encounter some supernatural obstacle such as non-existence. They will never run into something that differs from matter. No matter how much time passes prior to some event, time will go on after it. No matter how long ago a certain event took place, it was preceded by countless other events. The chain of events has never been broken. Its links are numberless. In the universe as a whole, there is no initial or culminating point. The universe is equally open at both ends. If time were finite, the world must have had a beginning. To acknowledge the beginning of the world's existence in time would be to acknowledge creation and, consequently, a creator. The concept of beginning is meaningful when applied not to the universe as a whole, but only to separate, specific things and processes, that is to say, to the finite. We can set no limits to the universe as a whole. It categorically forbids us to do so. It is ageless. It is infinitely old and eternally young. Someone once wittily remarked that he could not imagine the universe having lived its life and sadly vegetating for the rest of eternity. And so that's the end of the main part I wanted to share. Let me see. I mean, he sent me the whole of chapter 2. By the way, for anybody that's tuning in, this is I'm just reading a segment from a book called Dialectical Materialism by A. Spurgeon, which Dr. Richard Allen Miller emailed me this, this chapter of this book, because, like I mentioned before, we were talking about all this stuff this morning. There's a lot more other chapters here. You know what? I'll keep this a ongoing segment, and each time I'll share a new section of chapter 2. But all of these segments are all going to be chapter 2, which is the system of categories and philosophical thought. So, but for now, I'm going to go ahead and read the next part of chapter 2, and then we'll end it after that. So, just to clarify, and let's go back again. And by the way, so Richard Allen Miller is going to be coming on the show, not this week, but the following week on the 15th. And this week, though, I'm pretty excited because we're going to be, let's see, so we're either going to have Michael Cremo or Micah Hanks on this week. Either way, it's going to be one hell of a show. All right, let me go ahead and pull this back up here. All right, there we go. So the first section I just read of chapter 2 was space and time. So now we're going to move on to the next chapter. Yeah, I agree, Dan. Yeah, the Big Bang just doesn't... I don't buy it either. I agree 100%, sir. All right, and... man, what time is it over there? It's got to be like... What time is it over there, Dan? It's got to be pretty... either really late or really early, right? Anyway, let me move on to the next chapter. So the next chapter is The Principle of Universal Connection and Development. The concept of universal connection. Nothing in the world stands by itself. Every object is a link in an endless chain and is thus connected with all the other links. And this chain of the universe has never been broken. It unites all objects and processes in a single whole and thus has a universal character. We cannot move so much as our little finger without disturbing the whole universe. The life of the universe, its history lies in an infinite web of connections. Whereas the interconnection of things is absolute, their independence is relative. In the sphere of non-organic nature, there exist mechanical, physical, and chemical connections, which presuppose interaction either through various fields or by means of direct contact. In a crystal, which is an ensemble of atoms, no individual atom can move in complete independence of the others. Its slightest shift has an effect on every other atom. The oscillations of particles in a solid body are, and can only be, collective. In living nature, there exist more complex connections, the biological, which are expressed in various relations between and within species and also in their relations with the environment. In the life of society, connections become more complex, and we have production, class, family, personal, national, state, international, and other relationships. Connections exist not only between objects within the framework of a given form of motion or matter, but also between all its forms, woven together in a kind of infinitely huge skein. To clarify, that word is S-K-E-I-N. Never seen that one either. Our consciousness can contain no idea that does not express either imagined or real connections, and in its turn, this idea must of necessity be a link in a chain of other ideas and conceptions. Uh-oh. Somebody's calling me. Let me make sure it's not important. It's Brad. Yeah, I'll call him back. Probably is important, but I'm going to have to call him back because I'm going to finish this. So to continue, what is a connection? It is a dependence of one phenome on another in a certain relationship. Interesting verbiage there. The basic forms of connection may be classified as spatial, temporal, causal, and consequential, necessary and accidental, law-governed, immediate and mediate, internal and external, dynamic and static, direct and feedback, and so on. Connection does not exist by itself, without that which is connected. Moreover, any connection has its basis, which makes such connection possible. For example, the gravitational properties of material systems condition the force connection of cosmic objects. Atomic nuclear charge is a connection in the periodic system of the elements. Material production and the community of interests serve as the basis for the connections between human beings and society. The materiality of the world conditions the connection of everything with everything else, expressed in the philosophical principle of universal connection. In order to realize this or that connection, there must be certain conditions. They differ for various systems. All right, quick drink and vape break. You know what? Let me text Brad real quick. Actually, no. I'll wait. Okay. Let's go ahead and continue. Investigation of the various forms of connections is the primary task of cognition. Connection is the first thing that strikes us when we consider anything. We, of course, do not always think about such things, and this is natural enough, for one cannot think only in terms of universal connections when deciding simple, everyday, or even specific scientific problems. However, on the philosophical front, when one tries to consider the universal problems, one cannot adopt the position of never looking further than one's nose. This brings us to the methodological conclusion that in order to know an object in reality, one must embrace, study all its aspects, all the immediate and mediate connections. This is what drives scientific thought in its search for systematic connections everywhere, both in particles and in the whole. If we deny the principle of universal connection and partially the essential connections, this has a number of agricultural pests. Wait, this has a... Oh, sorry, wrong sentence. This has a disastrous effect. Let me start this sentence over. If we deny the principle of universal connection and partially the essential connections, this has a disastrous effect not only on our theory but also on our practice. For example, forest cutting reduces the bird population, and this, in turn, increases the number of agricultural pests. Destruction of forest stands up rivers, erodes the soil, and thus leads to a reduction in harvests. There are no birds or animals in nature that are absolutely harmful. The wolf, for example, because... Man, my phone is blowing up right now. The wolf, for example, because it eats other animals, including the weak and the sick, acts as a regulator of their numbers. Paradoxically, the mass extermination of wolves, far from protecting other species, actually reduces their numbers due to the spread of disease. Good point. So everything in the world is connected with something else. And this universal interconnectivity, and also the connection of the elements within the whole as, at any level, form an essential condition for the dynamic balance of systems. So now we're going to move into the next segment, called interaction. Partial segment, I should say. All right, we got about 10 more minutes here. Interaction. The human individual, for example, is not a lone traveler amid the jungles of existence. He is a part of the world interacting in various ways with that world. Separate cultures are not closed, isolated islands. They are like great waves in the ocean of history, which work upon each other, often merging into even broader waves, often clashing with waves of a different dimension, so that the regular rhythm of the rise and fall of individual waves is broken. Like any other system, an organism or a society lives and functions as long as there's a certain interaction of the elements in these systems or of the systems themselves with other systems. Everything that happens in the world may be attributed to the interaction of things, one element of which is equilibrium. Interaction is a process by which various objects influence each other, their mutual conditioning or transmutation, and also their generation of one another. Interaction is a kind of immediate or mediate, external or internal relationship or connection. The properties of an object may manifest themselves and be cognized only through its interconnection with other objects. The category of interaction is extremely versatile and may be used in various senses. In some cases, interaction is understood as the general basis or condition for the development of events. In others, it has the meaning of a complex, causal relationship. But interaction is most widely understood as a special form of causal connection, namely the two-way relationship. Interaction operates as an integrating factor by which the parts in a certain type of whole are united. For example, electromagnetic interaction between a nucleus and electrons creates the structure of the atom. The material unity of the world, the interconnection of all the structural level of existence, is achieved through the universality of interaction. The chain of interaction is never broken and has neither beginning nor end. Every phenomena is a link in the general universal chain of interaction. In the immediate sense, interaction is causal. Every cause is simultaneously both active and passive in relation to another cause. The origin and development of objects depend on interaction. Every qualitatively defined system has a special type of interaction. Every kind of interaction is connected with material fields and involves transference of matter, motion, and information. Interaction is impossible without a specific material vehicle. All right, quick break here. All right, we're getting to the end here. Okay, so to continue for the last segment here. The modern classification of interaction distinguishes between force and informational interactions. Physics knows 4 basic types of force interaction, which provide the key to our understanding of the infinitely diverse process of nature. These are the gravitational, the electromagnetic, the so-called strong nuclear interactions, and the weak decay interactions. Every type of interaction in physics has its own specific measure. Biology studies interaction at various levels in molecules, cells, organisms, populations, species, biological communities. The life of society is characterized by even more complex forms of interaction. For society is a process and product of interaction both between people and between man and nature. Unless we study interaction in its general and concrete manifestations, we cannot understand the properties, structures, or laws of reality. Not a single phenomenon in the world can be explained out of itself without taking into account its interactions with other objects. Interaction is not only the initial point of cognition, but also its culminating point. And the last segment here, development. Any type of connection or interaction must take a certain direction. Nothing in the world is final and complete. Everything is on the way to somewhere else. Development is a definitely oriented, irreversible change of the object from the old to the new, from the simple to the complex, from a lower level to a higher level. The vector of a developing phenomenon is towards acquisition of the fullness of its essence, towards self-fulfillment in various new forms. The new is an intermediate or final result of development in relation to the old. Changes may involve the composition of the object, or in other words, its quantity or quality, the type of connection of the elements of the specific whole, its function, or its behavior. That is to say, the means by which it interacts with other objects and, finally, all these characteristics taken as a whole. Development is irresistible. Nothing passes through one and the same state more than once. Development is a dual process. The old is destroyed and replaced by something new, which establishes itself in life not simply by freely evolving its own potential, but in conflict with the old. The crucial feature of development is time. Development takes place in time, and only time reveals its direction. Even the history of the concept of development goes back to the formation of the theoretical notions of the direction of time. The ancient cultures had a knowledge of development in the true sense. They saw time as a moving in cycles, and all events were thought to be predestined. The old way of thinking was that the sun must rise and set and hasten to its destined resting place. The wind would blow where it listeth and returns in its courses. What was bound to happen would happen, and what was done would always be done, and there was nothing new under the sun. The idea of a universe, perfect and complete, on which the whole ancient view of the world rested, precluded any question of oriented change that might give rise to new systems and connections. Any such change was understood as the evolution of certain possibilities that had been inherent in things from the beginning of time and had simply been hidden from view. With the rise of Christianity, the notions of time and its linear direction begin to be applied to the intellectual sphere, and, as experimental science takes shape, these notions gradually begin to blaze a trail in the study of nature, giving birth to the ideas of natural history, of oriented and irreversible changes in nature and society. The turning point here was the creation of cosmology and the theory of evolution in biology and geology. The idea of development then became firmly established in natural science and has since become an object of philosophical investigation. The orientation of the sciences on the idea of development substantially enrich it with a worldview and methodological principles, and played an essential heuristic role. For instance, biology and the history of culture showed that the process of development was neither universal nor homogeneous. If we consider development on a major scale, such as organic evolution, it is quite obvious that certain interactions of processes taking different directions are at work within it. The general line of progressive development is interwoven with changes that give rise to blind alleys of evolution or even paths of regress. Alongside processes of ascending development, we find degradation and decay of systems, descents from the higher to the lower, from the more perfect to the less perfect, and a lowering in the level of organization of systems. An example of degradation is to be found in biological species that die out because of their failure to adapt to new conditions. Degradation of a system as a whole does not mean that all its elements are beginning to disintegrate. Regress is the contradictory process. The whole falls apart, but certain elements in it may progress. What is more, a system as a whole may progress while certain parts of its elements fall into decay. Thus, the progressive development of biological forms as a whole goes hand in hand with the degradation of certain species. Cyclical processes, such as the transmutation of elementary particles, play a significant role in the universe. The branch of progress development known to science consists of the pre-stellar, the stellar, the planetary, the biological, the social, and hypothetical metasocial stages of the structural organism of matter. On the cosmic scale, the process of progressive and regressive development would appear to be of equal significance. Bam. And that's the end of the second segment here, which was called The Principle of Universal Connection and Development. Once again, this is all taken, I'm just reading out of a book, a chapter of a book that Dr. Richard Alan Miller sent me. If you're interested, the book is called Dialectal Materialism by A. Spirkin. That's Spirkin. And everything we're going to be doing in this series is all from Chapter 2. We just covered the first parts of Chapter 2, and with that concludes this Part 1 of this little series we're going to do, and over the course of the next few weeks, I'll read through the whole chapter with you guys. So that's pretty much it for now. Now, later tonight... Oh, sorry, I've been looking at the chat room. Man, it's already 10 in the morning over there. And yeah, good point, Dan. He says, the simplest example of connection is if we continue to kill off bees, we are toast. But that raises another question. Are we killing off the bees? Or who's killing off the bees? Something's going on there, right? I remember one time back when I used to deliver pizza, I went to this, went up to the door, rang the bell, but then I noticed right in front of the front door, it must have been like 35 or 40 dead bees just in a pile all in front of the front door. And I'm just sitting there like, what could have possibly happened here? And I asked the guy, he's like, yeah, I have no idea. They just woke up this morning and these bees were all here. And but there was a beehive pretty, on the property, clearly. But why did they, basically it looked like they were trying to get inside. Or in other words, they were trying to escape the outside. There was something outside that they clearly had a big warning, or, they knew something was wrong and they needed to get, because bees are smart little guys. They're very intelligent little creatures. And I wouldn't put it past them that they would recognize that by going indoors, they would, let's just, I don't know, maybe it was something that was sprayed with chemtrails, maybe somebody sprayed I don't know, something. But there was something in the air that they were trying to get away of. Was it man-made? Probably. But maybe not. Who knows? Maybe it was natural. But just by looking at the scene, it was pretty clear these bees were just trying to figure out how to get inside, and they see that door opening every day, so as far as they know, that's the only way to get in, and they died trying to get inside to escape whatever they were trying to escape. That's at least what I deduced from the situation. I'd love to hear any other thoughts on that. But, yeah, so anyway, later tonight, California time tonight, we're going to be doing... when was he see? Man is a 300-foot tidal wave on nature. How does it prepare or adjust to that? Well said. So later tonight, we're going to be doing a B-side episode, a live B-side episode with, we have yet to, a couple people are probably going to come on. Reverend John Polk, he might come on for a little bit. But we're just kind of going to hang out tonight, and no specific agenda, no specific topic. Not that we really have any agenda here anyway, other than to share knowledge. We're going to hang out with a couple of folks tonight and just kind of talk about what's on our minds and just kick back, have a couple of drinks, and just hang out. So if you guys want to join for that, probably going to start it somewhere around 7 or 8. California time, Pacific time, that is. So be on the lookout for that if you're interested. And other than that, we'll see you guys later. And one more thing. I got to cue this thing up anyway. So we're pretty... Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to I guess we'll just announce that on the main show on Friday. Yeah, I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'm gonna say sorry, folks. Basically, we have a new sponsor that I think is really cool. But yeah, we're kind of supposed to save it for the other day. But we're really excited about it, and we'll tell you guys all about it on Friday. But in the meantime, thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this segment. A lot of powerful information. You know, you might have to go back and re-listen to it, once or two or three times to really, fully grasp all this. But in this whole, there's going to be at least 4 or 5 other parts that I'm going to put out over the next few weeks. So definitely keep up with this if you found this interesting, and we'll see you guys tonight on the show. And with that, take care, everybody. Cheers. Cheers, Dan and Craig and everybody that listened. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and hope to see you tonight. All right, we'll see you later.